Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. Welcome to the Kolbecast, episode 99. Thank you for joining us. All of us have received gifts from God. Some have received the gift of being exceptional learners. Today we're joined by parents Veronica Foreman and Joseph Caro, along with our own Everett Buyarski, to discuss children who are sometimes referred to as gifted. This discussion allows us to see how the rigor and flexibility of Kolbe Academy allows the students' gifts to be nurtured, but also how, as a Catholic school, we recognize that the worth of these students is not in the gifts that they've received, but in being a child of God. We hope that you'll enjoy the show.
Hi there, I'm Bonnie, liturgical musician, popcorn and podcast fanatic, and Kolbe homeschooling mom to 4 lads and lasses of middle and high school age.
And this is Stephen, homeschooling father of 5 and director of development for Kolbe Academy.
Kolbe Academy is known for its academically challenging program that is robust yet flexible, not to mention faithful to the magisterium and classical in approach. This customization is accomplished in a variety of ways, through 3 mix and match formats of delivery, via curriculum choices, and in the ability to support students' individual strengths and lagging skills by selecting courses above or below the student's age-based grade level. Sorting through these options can be a daunting prospect, something which the Kolbe advisors are happy to help with. In episode 54, we took a high-level look at the curriculum and how Kolbe applies the principle of subsidiarity in the service of home-educating families. We'll link to that episode in our show notes, as well as to more information on the Kolbe website about this. Many families with students who are academically advanced or gifted have found in Kolbe a place where they can meet the intellectual needs of their children while also supporting their formation as whole people, mind, body, and soul, growing in holiness and virtue. Our guests today include 2 such parents, Mrs. Veronica Foreman and Mr. Joseph Caro. Hello to you both, and welcome to the Kolbecast.
Hello, thank you. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. Glad to be here too.
Good deal. We also have back with us Everett Buyarski, Kolbe's Academic Services Director, who has helped lots of families determine courses of study that serve the individual needs of the students, including the intellectually gifted. Welcome back, Everett.
Thank you. It's always good to be here.
Everett's one of our recurring cast members, as we like to say, so we will include his previous episodes in the show notes for this one. Veronica, it's a pleasure to see you today. I'd love to get to know you a bit better and hear what drew you to Kolbe.
So, we're a family of 3. We're living in San Antonio, and pretty much we've been homeschooling our whole life.
Okay.
But of course, Ellen was attending school from pre-K to 3rd grade. Mm-hmm. I would say homeschooling because she would attend school in the morning, but as a gifted student, in the afternoon, she would be demanding, asking for more. Mm-hmm. I would like to read. What can I do? Should I write? Math, everything. Okay. So we were always working on the side. When we decided to move completely to homeschooling, it was in 4th grade. After testing her, mm-hmm. we knew it was the time to start in a different environment. So she was all excited that we could do this at home, not just because we are very close to each other, but also because she would be able to select books, subjects. So that was one of the things. And now that she's moving into almost her last year of high school, I can see the benefits, or we can see the benefits of all this, because we can see that she's a very mature young lady and taking her own decisions, managing all what she's doing, and taking responsibility for all the tasks.
Well, I've been very impressed with Ellen from what I've seen of her. I'm amazed by her. I missed, though, how did you hear about Kolbe, or why did you decide to go with Kolbe?
Okay, there was a family at that Catholic school, and they were a military family. Mm-hmm. So there were times when their kids could attend that Catholic school, and other times when, they were traveling and they would use Kolbe Academy. So I remember very well when she mentioned, when I homeschool my kids, I use Kolbe Academy. And I just kept, for some reason, I kept the name. That was when she was in first grade, maybe. And I kept the name until fourth grade. So when we decided to homeschool, it was Kolbe Academy. There was no other place. We were in a classical school, so just moving to the same, plus the easiness to continue doing whatever you were doing or select the books they were offering. That was great because I just took some subjects from her previous school, new subjects from them, and just combine and continue, not trying to make a big change in whatever we were doing before.
Right.
So
yeah.
Yeah.
She's in high school now, right?
Next year she will start her senior year. So we're already looking at colleges and universities.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. We've actually met Veronica's daughter Ellen on KolbeCast episode 44, the Spotlight on the Student Newsletter team. Joseph, I'm happy to meet you today. Thank you so much for doing this, being part of this conversation. Would you tell us about yourself and your family and how you all came to Kolbe?
Yeah, sure. I had heard of Kolbe for several years, so it was on my radar. The reason for that was because my son, who's currently in Kolbe now as a ninth grader, we actually tried, I think I was just trying to remember, maybe 4 schools to find the right fit for him, which included a parochial school, a Catholic school, a local private school, homeschooling, just with different materials. And then another school, actually, another local school, a Montessori school. And I was looking for the right place for him. And we started Kolbe for him in, I think it was 8th grade. And he just really enjoyed it. And it really worked well for him. And it was perfect timing because I wanted to find something for high school. Hopefully that would be the same for all of high school and not move around. And when we found Kolbe in 8th grade, it seemed like it was going to work. And then we made the decision to do 9th grade. And I suspect that we're going to stay through all of high school because this year's gone really well. I also have a daughter who did Kolbe for a year, 6th grade. And that was really positive. She really loved it as well. But she had always been homeschooled. So she wanted to get her chance at, going to a brick-and-mortar school.
Sure.
So that's what she's doing right now. But you never know. She might be back at Kolbe in the future. So.
Right. Good deal. I'm glad it's worked out as it has for you guys. So let's get into how Kolbe is ideal for academically gifted students. Everett, would you take us through the options for customizing what Kolbe has to offer and highlight how these can work for such students?
Absolutely. One of the reasons Kolbe is fantastic for students who may have various academic gifts is really the same reason it's great for everybody is the level of customizability. Is that because it is a form of individualized education where the parent has a high level of control of what's being done. So that's the first reason. And for students who are academically gifted, it's so important that parents are able to advocate for their student to work to meet their students' needs, because many schools, many teachers may not be well equipped to do that. And so you need to have someone who can be the advocate, and who better to be doing that than the parent who knows their children the best. And that's where our advising staff is going to come into play. Is they're going to work with the parents to talk about what their students' needs are, what their students' abilities are, what the interests are, so we can try and get them into the right spot. Because we have different types of courses. We have the live online courses, we have the recorded self-paced courses, we have the traditional homeschool courses. Those are 3 different ways of doing courses. And then even within individual grade levels, we have different options for different courses. There might be a different history options or different math options. And that's where we can really work with parents to identify what are the needs of this student and what are the needs of the family in working with this student, so we can help coordinate that. Because what might work really well for one academically gifted student may not work well for another academically gifted student. I just had advisors just talking to me about in working with a parent who had expressed that transitioning from one format to another format made a huge difference for the success of that student, just because of the way their brain wrapped around and worked on bringing that information in. And so that's one of the key pieces, is that working with the parent who is the advocate, who is the primary educator, and then they can partner with our family advisors to look at and help work through that process of figuring out what it is. We have honors courses available at the high school level. We have some AP courses available, so we can talk through what is that balance. And some students might have narrow gifts. They might be really excel in a particular area in math or in science, in the foreign languages, in history or literature. Other students might be more broad-based as far as ahead intellectually, but might not have the same level of the high spike in a certain area. And so those are all pieces that we can work on working with parents to get the right fit for them.
It's pretty ideal how we have these options, and that you can also help us sort through them. And it's in this setting, we can kind of work through them without what can be sort of a charged term, this gifted or whatever, the different things that folks may have had to navigate in a different school system. It's a different ballgame.
And I think the one other piece to that is that, so we have all of these options, but we can also recognize that for students who have particular needs or particular gifts, we can also partner with you about resources that are outside of Kolbe. Is that there might be a situation where a student is really strong in a certain area, and our curriculum may not be the right fit for that student in that area. And so and there might be other programs out there that we think in general our program is better in an area, but for a specific student and a specific need, this other program might work really well for them in helping to challenge them. I think the one that jumps out to me most of all is something called the Art of Problem Solving for Math, which is a math curriculum that really dives deeper into problem solving, deeper levels of understanding, to really challenge students above and beyond the base math curriculum that we offer. I think our math curriculum is fantastic. It prepares students really well across the board. It's academically rigorous. But for students who are truly gifted in mathematics, who their minds embrace math in a way that's different than a large portion of the population, that's a program that we can work with you to help get you pointed in the right direction. That may be a good fit for a particular student, even though it's not our program. And that's something that, again, our advisors are going to have the knowledge to talk to you about based on where your student is at. Is it possible that there might be something that is an even better fit, that we're still going to be able to bring that into your student's transcript. We're going to be able to award credit for the work that's being done for that. So it's still part of your student's Kolbe education, even though it's coming from an outside vendor.
Okay, Veronica, your daughter Ellen, like I said, was a KolbeCast guest on episode 44. Not only is Ellen very involved in student life at Kolbe, she does several other things. She's also a stellar student and an accomplished pianist. Can you elaborate on how she balances her advanced scholastic work with her considerable time spent on the piano bench, along with everything else?
It's been a challenge sometimes, certainly, because throughout the years, of course, the subjects are, increasing the amount, the time you need to spend studying, preparing essays, working on them. Plus, piano requires a lot of dedication. So she started piano back when she was 6 years old. She was attending Catholic school here in San Antonio. We moved to homeschooling in 4th grade, but just plain homeschooling. And she would find times to do it. But these days, now that she's in high school, we start our days at 6 a.m. She ends her day at midnight, usually. Oh. She prefers to work at night on essays, and she prefers to play the piano right in the morning. She would go around 4 hours doing this and, taking breaks during the day. And yes, it requires dedication from the parents, I guess, and also from the student. I think Kolbe Academy helped us a lot in the way they prepare their courses, so we can accommodate the needs of our students, especially in these times.
Sure. Do you mean like on the homeschool side with how you can do certain things on certain days or double up, like you can distribute the workload that way? Or has that helped you guys with working with her practice schedule and her performances and competitions and things?
She's taking a mix of online courses as well as homeschool courses.
Okay.
With the online courses, you need to be there at the required times. She needs to prepare her homework and present those at the time assigned. But for the homeschool courses, we can do, okay, we're going to do semester 1 in 2 months. We're going to do semester 1 for this other subject in 3 months. So we can go spacing everything. And there are times when we need more time for a semester. Okay, we just don't have the time to do this. And the fact that she can work at the different times and get ready for everything, that she's also working in different or participating in different organizations. So that demands having the time, and also keeping that state of mind for a young girl, enjoying her time with friends, and just being a child also. No?
Yes, that's great. That's impressive how you guys keep in contact on that and how she manages all that. That's amazing. Joseph, we'd love to get another parent's perspective on how Kolbe has been able to meet the needs of your son and what that customization looks like for your family. Would you share that with us?
Yeah, sure. I'll try. It as you know, sometimes I think for anybody who's homeschooling, things get complicated, how you're going to put it together. But one of the things that actually worked out that simplified it very much for my son is that he was able to just take full online courses, which I have to say it's pretty challenging, at least from my point of view. It's nothing like I would have been able, or I had access to, as a child. Yeah. And so I went to public school, and, I'm constantly amazed at what they're studying in 9th grade. I don't think I even had heard about it until I was in college, or maybe, well into college. And so I know that the full-time online is not necessarily for everyone if all your classes are online, because it does add that element of like we just previously talked about being at each class, and you don't have as much flexibility. And so Veronica, when you were talking, it made me a little bit thinking in myself, like, well, maybe we should look into that, doing some of the traditional homeschool, because that flexibility would really helpful to condense or expand, the time you spend on certain things. For my son, he actually is a pianist as well. So it's been very helpful. Kolbe has enabled that. And the reason that I say that is because, like Veronica mentioned, somebody who has an outside pursuit, whether it's, music or sports or whatever it might be, it just takes time and dedication. With Kolbe, whether it's online or the more traditional homeschool, or a combination of both, what you really gain a lot of time and efficiency. So if you're going to a brick and mortar school, just the drive time there and back, and then the lining up time, and if you add all of the inefficiencies, they really add up, right? Kolbe, it's very efficient. You're done with class, you take off your headphones, you go practice piano. It's you're at home. So everything moves much more smoothly, which I think can give children who are trying to get the most out of their day It gives them, it doesn't put as much pressure on them. I think they get a little bit more time to work it out for themselves, when they want to practice or when they want to study, and I think that's very beneficial for us anyway. So that's partly why it was such a good fit. The other reason is because I've only been here for 2 years, but I have found that everybody, and first of all, I just want to say everybody who's involved in Kolbe so far that I've spoken to has hit it out of the park. Every time I call or every time I send a message, I mean, it's just been incredible. It's been incredible. And we joined during the height of the transitional period where I think you gained 1,000 new enrollments. And we were brand new. So I was calling and asking really, silly questions because I had no idea what I was doing. And the people who helped me universally, there was never a bad conversation. They really helped me, but they also were able to help me navigate what was possible for my son, because we realized really quickly that he was going to need a more tailored track through it. And I think what we realized was that the flexibility was there so that he could, for instance, take a class that was a higher grade level. That was no problem. Or he could not do a class and pick it up later, or he could skip over classes that you would normally have, but since he was able to do the work already, he didn't need to repeat it. Now, I'll tell you that's refreshing, right? Because that's one of the hard hurdles actually in some other schools, is to try to work that out, because if you say, well, I want to skip a year, I want to skip a class, it's not as easy to do it for whatever reason. But it seems like this system, they understand that what's going to help the child flourish might not be the path that's been written down or laid out. And that idea of like, well, how are we going to help him get to where he wants to be, get him or her to where she wants to be, that has been really helpful. So also having someone check it over, and I've talked to the counselors a few times just to know that I'm not going, too far off the beaten path, and that he'll be able to handle it, or these things will work out in the end when it's a non-traditional schedule. So that's been really helpful as well. But he loves it. He loves the academic rigor of it. He loves the challenges of it. I think he likes interaction with the students who are, as far as I can tell, are universally really engaged in their education, that's a huge component as well, being with other like-minded students. So that's been really helpful. All of those things have just been a great blessing to us.
Wonderful. Everett, do you find that a lot of people are surprised when they find out about all the options available to them, and they may have been used to encountering the hurdles that Joseph's talking about with skipping either grades or classes and the fun that is, and then they come and talk to you guys? What's that like for you?
I think that's, first of all, it's always one of the great joys of being here is hearing all of that, is hearing that and knowing that we get to be a part of that. Because, right, for people who are coming from a more traditional educational background, again, I went to a public school my entire time. These options, if you want any of those, you have to fight for them, right? You have to be, your parents have to be on the front line fighting for you to even have a chance at doing some of those things. And so often there'll be roadblocks put in your way that prevent you from doing what you as a parent know is best for your children. And so it can be, people will come to us and say, wait, we're allowed to do that? Yeah, absolutely. One of the reasons, the biggest reason that people choose to educate their children at home is for this individualized education. Now, there are other reasons. Obviously, Catholic identity is a huge part of who we are as mission. There may be some fit issues with, certainly people who are gifted musicians, people who are heavily involved in athletics is another good reason to homeschool, because of the flexibility. Obviously, there are lots of reasons, but for me, the number one is that individualized education. And so being able to share that with parents and let them know that, no, we don't have to put your children in boxes. We can really work with you to figure out what is best for them is amazing. And looking back at, just my own story, when I was going through this public education, I was blessed to have a couple of really exceptional teachers, who were, one in elementary school in 5th and 6th grade, who pushed me really hard in both language arts and math, and then one in middle school who again pushed me really hard in math as well. But outside of those couple of teachers, and there's a couple more in high school that I ran into as well, many of them just weren't equipped to deal with what I needed as far as being challenged. And so the response then is they don't know what to do with me. And as long as I'm not misbehaving, then fantastic. They'll just let me do my own thing, which in my case meant I read Tom Clancy books in junior high in the back of the class. And the teachers thought that was great because I wasn't getting in trouble and I was reading. And so that was a success in their minds. Yeah. But, when my parents hear about it, they go, "You're letting him do what?" Yeah. It wasn't helping me. It wasn't driving me forward. It wasn't challenging me. Again, by the grace of God, I had this wonderful math teacher who wouldn't tolerate any of that nonsense, and was just said, "All right, you did that math. Here's the next math. You did that math. Here's the next math. Okay, you'd like to learn some more about that. Here's the next one." And because she was willing to do that, and obviously cared enough for me as a person to challenge me and not just let me go, that I was able to advance in math to the point where I was taking a pre-calculus as a freshman in high school, because she just pushed me ahead and pushed me ahead and pushed me ahead. And so I think that's the exciting part is that rather than us as administration fighting with you as parents and putting roadblocks in front of you, we can view this as, no, we're all on the same team here, working with your students to help you get your students the best education that they need, and how can we help you through that process. So it's one of the great joys is hearing those kinds of stories about how you come from this one background, which again was my experience as a student, and how much of a challenge that was, and that we can provide something different for your children. That's great. So thank you for sharing that.
I love that both Everett and Joseph, you're talking about that efficiency as well. So that's just built into Kolbe. So like you're saying, if you're a gifted student, if things come easily, obviously in a classroom, you're just going to be reading Tom Clancy novels at some point. So you've got, when you're done, you're done, is one of the things. So if you go through faster, that's great. You can start on the next thing. But one of the things I'd always advise people who had gifted children who wanted more was always to delve deeper usually. And it's like, okay, well, you're reading the Iliad. You could spend years going over the Iliad. There's such depth in the curriculum that it's already really deep. So you could read more as well. If you go to the homeschooling plans, I know they're just thick with different options that you could add in if a particular area interests you. But boy, do I wish I had this education when I was a boy. That would have been fantastic.
Just a short story. There's a particular book on the AP literature, and that always every year causes controversy. Can't remember the name, but there was the response from her teacher was, if you are properly catechized, you should know how to deal with the content in this book. And that's true. She's in that class, and yes, the book is strong, but the responses on her essays are very, very mature, very responsible, very, in depth. The way she's learning to think and approach all these situations, or in this case, the books.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
No, that's perfect. My wife was just reading through an old history book, and on the back, she just pulled up the back, and it said something basically like classical education is the intent is to get you to be able to look at things and analyze them, to think about them yourself. And it was basically talking about how important that is for our society. So I see this, I hear this over and over again with Kolbe parents who it's like, they went off to college and they were exposed to this crazy thing. And here was their very well thought out response. They weren't thrown off the rails. They knew where they were going. I love hearing that. And I've heard it now several times. It's fantastic.
I'd like to speak to something similar, just about that niche that Kolbe could fill in this way. When you have someone who's academically gifted, there are a lot of programs out there that you can tap into. I'm just, for lack of a better word, I'm just going to summarize it and say like Mensa, for instance, right? There's like Mensa for kids, but there's different variations and different summer programs and different things that you find out about. And one of the things that was a little bit disheartening for me as a Catholic was that almost all of the programs that I looked at, it was very, I don't know how to describe it properly, but very, certainly secular, but not just secular, but maybe even anti religion in a way, or anti-theistic or materialistic. Or the point is that I think there's a place that Kolbe can work really well, is that when you have students who are academically gifted and they're looking for a rigorous academic program, you don't have to sacrifice the Catholic component of that to get it. And I think you used to have to do that. And to some extent that does still happen. And so it was very refreshing to me and very valuable to me that in some sense I can trust what's happening at Kolbe. Because as he gets older, a lot of it is more on his own. And I'm not worried as much. I still worry. I'm a dad, I'm always sort of looking over everybody's shoulder, like making sure that everything's okay. But I'm not worried as much because I can trust Kolbe to come at these problems and at these issues from a Catholic worldview, right? So that it's so, I can't stress how important that is, because normally if you were in this high level academic discussion, the nature of the human person might be in question. Certainly that, if the only thing that exists is, material being, right? So non-material being is sort of out the window. So, in science or math or anything like that. So I think it's a very privileged maybe space that Kolbe could occupy to provide both this, challenging academic things for gifted kids, but also not jettison the Catholic faith at the same time. So I hope that Kolbe can sort of keep the eye on that, part of the equation, because it's very important for us.
Just another thought. I truly think that education should change in the next coming years. The way it's presented, like we go to a certain institution, we sit there for many hours, and then we go back home. It's a format that might need to be reconsidered in the next coming years, because it's proved now that after the pandemic, we can see that it works. Perhaps not for everybody, but it works. So, yes.
We've talked about that a couple of times on the Kolbe cast, just how well, when talking with the Lunds, for example, we were a few podcasts ago, talking about how the classroom setting really is kind of an industrial age sort of mentality to it, where now we're not in the industrial age, and thinking is is just about everybody's business now, and which it wasn't always that way. So, and just the strange things that you get, people can make it work. A lot of great things can happen in good schools, but the fact that you're in a room with 20 other people your same age, we talked about that before, kind of, and that's a strange situation to be in. That doesn't happen naturally, and just how hard that can be on a lot of students, where you're now vying for the love of your one teacher or whatever that's there, and so that you get that kind of nastiness sometimes, unless it's really kept under control in a good Catholic environment. But you want to try to be the best, be the one who's getting that love and getting that attention. And so just even the environment certainly seems to be outdated, but we're slow to move because it's what we've been doing, I guess, for a long time. But I'm so grateful for the Kolbe experience and the homeschooling and those things that are breaking that mold a bit.
Mm-hmm. I like what you said too, Joseph, about the like you can go deeper in the study of a particular area of interest or a topic, while also interacting with your family and developing those relationships and developing those other aspects of your person, that it all comes together. It's not that, and I'm back to the same thing about it. It's not just you are just your academic sense. It's just all these things coming together. So, yeah.
Well, even though it isn't the same as being physically with a bunch of other people, there is that aspect of being with the other students in the class, which I think is beneficial for, at least for my son has found it beneficial. And I'm grateful for that as well. I guess that might be one of the pieces that are specific just to the online part of it, that the interactions he's had with the other students have been really beneficial and very fruitful. And, it seems like they've been characterized by kindness and understanding and encouragement, which has been very nice, very refreshing to have that. I don't know if that's just because maybe it's self-selecting, like if you're at Kolbe, you really want to be there at Kolbe, maybe, or I'm not sure what it is, but they all seem very encouraging and very call each other onto a courtesy, right, towards each other. Maybe it's the teachers doing that as well, I suppose. But that's been very refreshing. Good to see that even though there is that technology involved, there's still a human interaction that can happen, which, as we all know, is really important to have as part of your education. So I just wanted to mention that I've been heartened by the interaction among the students as well. That's been a good part of our experience.
Good.
Yeah, when we've had a chance to talk to some of those teachers, you see that what a great job Megan and some of the people have done in hiring that staff out, because they are just so authentically Catholic and just love their faith and want to bring that charity and that respect to their classroom. And so it's been impressive. It's been very impressive. But I've experienced that as well. It's just like, wow, these are good environments for the kids to be in. This is how you should be interacting.
Yeah, absolutely. They're getting such a great coaching in how to engage in these great conversations and civil discourse, as we've talked about with Dr. Hassler and some other folks on previous episodes, how to have these positive interactions with each other. It's really inspiring to see. And you're so right. The online classes provide a great forum for the students to interact with each other and encourage each other and help each other grow along with the teachers. And so there's that communal aspect, and there is the time that is dedicated to that purpose, but it's not the whole day, all day, every day, the kind of thing where it's you have that time, but then you also have your own time.
And that always seems really valuable. I know when we tend to not have like just age particular friends, but we tend to befriend families in our own family. And so, it's always fun then to see families interacting, because you are getting people at all different ages, but you see that there's still that need. Like, this is a person kind of developmentally where I am there, so they'll eventually match up with they're people they're roughly their own age, so they can talk about things at the same level and do things like that. But again, because we have classes meeting once or twice a week, you've got, oh boy, I can go in and discuss this great things with these friends that I've met, so
Yeah.
it's kind of in my mind, a perfect situation. But
As far as I can tell, when my son has tried to engage maybe, or to go maybe deeper, like you said, Stephen, I think as far as I can tell, most of the, well, I should say all of the teachers, I think, have welcomed it. They haven't brushed them aside or said, let's we're not going to do that, or they'll encourage him to do that on his own, or something like that. But what they didn't do is just squelch it. I think I've seen that, and that's been very encouraging as well. I want to, in defense of public school teachers, right, I suppose, or any school, for that matter, you have, I think, Everett, you experience this, right, in public school, is that it just doesn't make sense economically or time wise to deal with the students who are doing well. Like, their concern really is the students that are not up to par, and they have to bring them up to par. So what happens is, anybody who is above where they need to be, well, we don't have to worry about them, right? And that system doesn't work for these types of children. And so even just allowing them to say what they want to say, and then tell them, go do that, like, go find that out, is a very encouraging atmosphere, instead of, well, you're done, here's extra work that you can do in the same subject that you've just been doing, more math problems that are exactly the same. That doesn't work, in my experience. That doesn't work for people who need that extra challenge. So Kolbe has been great for that, because I think the teachers are able to be flexible themselves in their own classrooms, and maybe they would give some sort of extra, tell them, hey, you should check this out, or you should look at this book. And then even maybe be willing to discuss it in a different forum. I don't know, like in an office hours, or through an email or something like that. So I haven't felt the sort of, oh, please don't get in my way, kind of, you're distracting the class kind of thing that you might find in other situations. My son, when he was younger, was in a school, and again, it's not the school's fault. It's the way schools are run. And it's the state, influence that. There was a Lexile score. I don't know if you're familiar with the way they do the Lexile score. Well, you take a test, and it tells you what your Lexile score is, and then all the books have been categorized to fit a certain Lexile score, and that's what you're allowed to read, I suppose. Well, when my son found out that, there is this Lexile score, he also realized that a lot of the books that he was interested in were actually at a lower Lexile than he had. And he ran into this problem where he wanted to read a book that was not up to his Lexile, and they wouldn't let him read it, which is odd, because his Lexile was above what his grade level was by far. So I think the next time he took the test, he actually bombed it on purpose. He gamed that system so he could get a lower Lexile score in order to read books that he felt attracted to. I told him, look, from now on, don't purposely, bomb these standardized tests in order to get where you want to be. But he realized that he was being limited, and it's a weird limitation, right? It's not just limitation that you can't go beyond where you're at, but also that you can't investigate other things that you might be interested in. And so just to have the flexibility to pursue your interests and to develop in the way that God is sort of leading you providentially to develop is that's a great gift, right? That's a boon to just flourishing as a human being. So I think that's another aspect of it, is that you can find your path, and not everybody's going to have the same interests, and not everybody's going to be good at the same things. But with that ability to customize it, as Everett was talking about, you can sort of navigate the path that you're on in a way that I think helps you to find your strengths, maybe even develop new strengths that you didn't know you had. So that's been beneficial for us as well.
So there's definitely a difference between going deeper and doing busy work.
Mm-hmm. There's a big difference.
Yep.
But I think the thing that jumps out most to me about that story is that anybody who has students who have a level of giftedness has probably had some kind of bizarre experience along those lines of someone realizing that something doesn't make sense and then manipulating the system to get to what they want. I mean, I think that is a very typical experience of a student who is academically gifted in some way. So, I mean, obviously, we don't want to encourage students to do that, but you can see why they would look at it and say, this doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
What would make the most sense is this. What should I do to make this thing that makes sense happen? Well, in this case, I should bomb the test so I can do what I need to happen. I mean, is most students at that grade level, their mind is not going to make all of those connections to get to that point. And so that's a very typical experience of a student who might have a level of giftedness. And again, to Joseph's comments just there is, right. It can be really easy to feel like we're talking negatively about public education, and it's really important that those teachers who were letting me read books in the back of the classroom, they were trying, they were well intentioned. There was never any question of bad actors or anything along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
But as you said, is just given the system that they're in, and you just talked about this system of industrialized education, where the goal of education is to produce the highest number of useful members of society possible with the least amount of investment. That doesn't make any sense to invest in one of these people. This person is already going to be a successful member of society. We can just check that box and move on to investing the resources in these other people. And so that's the system of education that we're dealing with. And most teachers, they're stuck in that box. They can't get out of it. Not many of them wish they could get out of it. Would love to get out of that system. The math teacher who pushed me forward, she'd been a math teacher for over 40 years. She started teaching math after she graduated high school, back at a time when you could do that. When if you were good at something, they would just let you do it. So you're good at teaching math, great, go teach math. They weren't concerned about the box checking of having 4 years of education and a higher math degree and a certificate and continuing education and all of those things. She was good at math and taught math. By the time she was teaching me, she'd been doing it for 45 years. She'd been doing it long enough that there's nothing that the system could do to her that she was worried about. So she could break the box. She was at a point where she could do that. Most teachers are not in a situation where they can do that, right, because of this model of education. And that's the limitations. And that's why we have some of the challenges we do, through no fault of these teachers, but because of the larger system that they're a part of. And that's the reason that for many of these students, you need to get out of the system, is so that you can find people who can get out of that box, who can help them. And that's one of the great things that we're able to do here at Kolbe, is that we can hire teachers who have spent all their lives wanting to be able to get out of the box and haven't been able to, but because of the kind of place we are, that we can hire people remotely who they can teach in the mornings, and then they can go home with their kids. They can be retired from teaching. They taught for years, and now they can just do the couple of subjects that they've always loved best. And then when a student, is in theology class is saying, boy, I'm loving what we're reading right now, what else can I do? I can say, hey, fantastic news. Why don't you go check out Justin Martyr's Apologies? And let's talk about that, right? Because they can have that level of enthusiasm because they haven't been beaten down by the system. So we can, not only can we nurture love of learning in the students, but we can actually hopefully restore some of that joy to the teachers, who love doing what they do. And most teachers love doing what they do. And we're fortunate enough that we can put them in a situation where they can actually do that in a way that they might not be able to in some other schools.
So many good things coming from this opportunity that we are so blessed to be a part of. Yeah. So there is a great, even in the term giftedness, it's a gift, these intellectual abilities and academic success that many of our students have. They don't come without their challenges, though, in many instances. And there are a lot of things that come along with that. There's some stereotypes that academically gifted kids face. Among them, that expectation that because they're smart, then they've got it all together, or they're going to get straight A's all the time, or they are responsible in whatever way outside of that, or, they get all their homework turned in correctly. It's all done on time. All these assumptions that are made that are not necessarily true. Sometimes they are, but not necessarily. And the intellectual ability is separate from these other skills, some of which we go into in episode 68, Grace for the Nitty Gritty, some areas of executive function, and speaking to some of those areas when some stuff does, stuff slips through the cracks, and related topics. So for people interested in that, you can check out that episode. But let's talk about some of these challenges that our students face, and we ourselves, if we have some of these same gifts and challenges. There are some lagging skills in other areas sometimes, and like Everett said, sometimes the area of giftedness is quite narrow and the other areas not so much, but there may be other health needs that need to be addressed that we can do at home while meeting these intellectual needs in a way that is not as easy to do in the school setting. Let's talk about some of those challenges and stereotypes.
So one of the things that jumps out to me when you talk about is sometimes the academic giftedness can even hide or cover up some other things that are going on there. Mm-hmm. For me, it was an underlying ADHD. And because ADHD is kind of a wide spectrum. There's students who are heavily on the hyperactive side, but there's also the inattentive side, the easily distracted side. And because students who tend to be on the inattentive side very rarely cause difficulties in class, so they aren't typically noticed. And so, especially if you're a student who does well in school, you're academically gifted, you can be getting good grades or sufficiently acceptable grades that something like an ADHD with an inattentive presentation doesn't even get noticed. Yeah. And as a result, it wasn't noticed. It kind of went on up until a point where it caused failure. Because one of the challenges with ADHD is you have a kind of an activation threshold where when tasks are difficult, if it's not sufficiently interesting, it becomes almost impossible to start to go. And that's the executive functioning that you were talking about. So as long as it's something interesting, boy, you want to talk to me about trigonometry, I am in. On the other hand, you want to talk to me about, writing, doing a 10-page research paper on a topic that I'm not interested in. Boy, I mean, check me out of that one. But the challenge is if you have this academic giftedness, a lot of times teachers will say, oh, but he's really smart. Mm-hmm. Oh, but he's such a good student. And they'll let you skate by with things they probably shouldn't let you skate by with. And that's happened multiple times to me throughout my career as a student, of times that I should have failed classes. And in fact, me failing classes probably would have led to some sort of, let's discuss what's going on here, that might have actually led to a diagnosis and got me some help much earlier on. I should have failed a class in junior high. I definitely should have failed my AP literature course in high school. But it got to the point where the teacher liked me enough because I said insightful things in class that he was willing to overlook the fact that I hadn't turned in 3 of the 4 essays that were due that semester. Which, I mean, again, he was coming to him out of a well-intentioned place that he liked me, he cared for me, he didn't want me to fail. But as a result of that, I got off to college before any of that even came due. In college, they weren't willing to let you skate on that. And so because of I've always been done well in school, then when you get to a point where all of a sudden that these things come to a crashing halt, there's no way to skate by, there's no way to end up getting a grade better than what you need to do. You end up at a point where, I end up failing a couple of classes, there in college because of something that had been covered up, for years and years and years. And it wasn't until even after college that I had this diagnosis that helped me put together, oh, that's what was going on all of this time. Mm-hmm. And especially because the idea was ADHD was, oh, those are people who they're hyperactive, they're bouncing off walls, that they're always active, they're always moving. Well, that was kind of the idea, the vision of what I had that would look like. It didn't look anything like what I was dealing with, where it was just boy, that looks really boring. This looks way more interesting. It doesn't matter that I ought to be doing this thing. Yeah. Or just, I'm off staring out the window and teachers trying to call on me and it's going, oh, okay. So I think that's one of the things that we can look at is we can see the grades as the evaluation of a student's success. And because if that's all we're looking at and we see, well, the grades are pretty good, then we might be missing some other things that are going on. Or similarly, my parents were persistently frustrated with the idea that you're really smart. How come you're not acing everything? How come you're not getting A's? What's up with this B or this B plus or whatever? When clearly the material is material that I could have done. Well, there's some other things that were going on that were really affecting that just weren't able to be put together. And I think that's one of the things that we need to be aware of, especially as parents now. Because I went through that experience, I can be more aware of that. And because there's some genetic components that I can pay attention to that as I'm looking at my own children and seeing, what things might be happening that I might need to look at and work on.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a real advantage in the homeschooling model or the Kolbe model as well, right? Because both you've got the parent who's there and really wants what's best for their child. Not that the teacher doesn't, but in a special way, they're given the grace to do that. But also you've got the same student for years and years and years. So, I mean, like one of the things is, Everett, as you were talking, it made me think of my wife has taught for a lot longer than I had, but she will run across these students who just have amazing memories, and they've had amazing memories for so long. So they get pushed because they think, oh, they can just solve every problem. And so they're not developing other skills until you get to a certain point. And then, then the memory isn't sufficient to just do everything. They haven't built those skills up. Or even things like she would work with students and they would have such a great memory that it's like, this paper is word for word from the text. You're plagiarizing. And they're like, no, I did this closed book, just writing everything out. It's like, okay, well, now we know. So now we have to work on getting that skill, because when you go to college, they might not give you the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, I understand what you're doing now. This is plagiarized. You're out of college. So even just noticing those things developing and being able to pay attention to that, because you're seeing everything through the years and trying to get the best out of your child over that time too, trying to give them the best that they can have, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you said, Stephen, about the parents having that, they're with it's their child, first of all. And then they see that throughout the years, but also they have that grace of state for that particular endeavor that no one else has. And that is something, I don't know if I'm peculiar in this way, but I've always told my children, whether they're at a school, whatever school they're at, I always tell them, now we're still homeschooling. I'm just subcontracting out, but I'm actually your teacher. And I hope they do a good job, because I might be paying them money or whatever. But really, when it comes down to it, it's my responsibility, right? It's my wife and I, it's our co-responsibility to educate our children. And, it's because we have that grace, I think, we're given that grace if we respond to it, to be able to see those things happening as they develop and to try to help them in the ways they need help. And, you mentioned asynchronicity, Bonnie, and that's, at least in my situation, that's been an issue. Mm-hmm. You run into that when you skip grades, especially very easily, because you're not at the right age, right, for your peers, or for whatever reason. You can have different asynchronicities. It can be physical as well. And just balancing those out. But another thing about, I think, people who are, gifted children is that they at least I've always seen in the encounters that I've had, that with whatever gifts they have, there's always some sort of concomitant challenge that comes with it. It might even be as simple as they think on a level that is deeper, so things bother them more sometimes, right? They're seeing the nuances of a situation, or maybe they're having maybe even trouble sleeping because they understand the world in a way that maybe another 5-year-old might not yet, right? Or they're already predicting, like, where am I going to go to college when they're in second grade, which I think is one of, things like that happen. At least I've heard other parents talk about that. So there's these challenges that they face that can be difficult to navigate in some ways. My son, for instance, he taught himself how to read. We didn't teach him. He just one day he just started reading street signs, and I was confused for a moment, like how much can you read, because that was unusual. And so he went to a preschool, and it was a little bit funny because they had the schedule written up on the board for the teachers. It was like a team of teachers, and he evidently was telling the other students about what was going to happen. Like, oh, hey, we're getting cookies, at the end of this, or we're going to be talking about volcanoes. Oh, that's great. And the teachers they couldn't understand, like, why. And then they realized that he was reading their schedule. So the next time I went in, they had it covered up with a sheet, and they had to peek through the sheet to see what the board said. And then they would send things home, right? They would send letters home, but he was reading the letters about like what was going to happen in school. So then they had to staple them closed, but they would normally not have been doing that. Right. But because he was getting all this information that maybe his age wasn't, maturity level wasn't proper for that. It could be difficult for him to deal with, just the implications of the knowledge that he was inferring or understanding in other ways. Just the intensity maybe that gifted kids have, right, can put a lot of pressure on them. Yep. And so they like, Bonnie, you were talking about the grades. I mean, they can put pressure on themselves to have like perfect grades, which, as we all know, at least I know, that not having perfect grades is not the end of life. I mean, right, did not have by any means perfect grades. And, I don't know, that intensity can be a challenge too for gifted kids too. I don't know, Veronica, if that's been your experience, but I assume it might be.
Hope I can put everything together. I would say the importance of using resources or tools available. It's always important. We tested Ellen back in 4th grade when we decided to leave our Catholic school. It was a really good Catholic school. Just, it was the moment. She really needed go beyond, go start doing something, other stuff. And that was one of our reasons. We started this test, not just to prove that she was gifted, but just to know how much she was gifted, and also to know if there was something else, if she was a 2E, for example. And so after that, we decided to join Mensa. At that age, it's just there's not many things available for them. But now that she's in high school, she's part of the Mensa Honor Society. Just the name is like, oh, I'm part of this. But they require certain amount of service hours in order to achieve certain certificates, diplomas, etc. And that helped her a lot in this stage of her life, because she's looking for ways to volunteer, how to help the community. Now, talking about the pressure, yes, at some point, how to handle all the things that you have to do in a day or to present in a month, it can be a pressure for them. Some students might show that, exploding, crying, or something, and some others is just like you see the person stressed out. Yeah. So in her case, she's learning to talk all those things, like, okay, we just need to plan, and if you plan and you organize, you can work on all those things, or just give a time. Maybe this needs to wait in order to accomplish this. And but yes, it's a constant in their lives, not just from the society, but from them. They are a gifted student or a gifted child is always looking their mind is always looking for what else, especially the ones who with who are looking into writing. What else can I write? What can I read? What? And the ones who go for math or science, or the ones who the whole brain is working for all the things. So it's important to look at those resources and tools and try to take advantage of them in order to prepare yourself to help them. Because as a parent, we have certain knowledge on what to do, but then you need to prepare for every situation that your children are dealing with. So
jump back. One of the things that Joseph had said, I'm a counselor for an ability test called the Highlands Ability Battery. And one of the things they do, they're testing abilities, but one of the interesting things is they have these what they call driving abilities. And so you scoring really high does these wonderful things, gives you this wonderful ability, but they also make some things harder. And they usually make demands on you. If you don't use them, you get really frustrated. And so the easiest example is idea productivity, which they test, which is just how quickly can you come up with different ideas, and so you think, well, wow, that's great. What a great ability to just brainstorm and be creative and come up with things. And then you think, yeah, but try to keep your focus on something for any length of time that doesn't really have your interest. I don't want my brain surgeon with high idea productivity. I want him focused right here on what he's doing. So it's one of the things that they recognize, that sometimes those really high abilities there's, even without the emotional and the stress and the pressure of that, there's just consequences to having really high abilities.
Yeah.
I often too think that when you read the lives of the saints, you often see that they seem to excel in the places that are giving them the most trouble, right? Like almost as if the grace is active. It's almost part of their sanctification, right? That they have an issue that they have to work through, like it's anger or something like that, some other thing, and that's partly what makes them a saint. And I think with gifted kids, that I see that whatever downsides to it are these challenges that actually, if they can work through them, right? If they can grow from them, that actually makes them into the kind of person that a holier person, right? And so I think about this a lot, that whatever gift someone has, whether it's academic or music or what artistic talent or whatever, athletic, God must have given them that for a specific, a reason, right? It might not be a reason for the outside world, although it very well could be, but it also could be part of the process of their own sanctification, how they're going to deal with that, right? How they're going to respond to that gift. So that's a big component as well. But I also try to stress with my son that the gifts, the giver of the gifts gives his gifts to some people and not to others, but it's so that we work together, right? But also the gifts aren't something that are due to you. You didn't earn them. Mm-hmm. And they also might not always be there. Like I joke with my son, I say, look, all it takes is one stone to the head, one rock to hit you in the head, and you might not have as good of memory. And he's a pianist, right? So Veronica, this as well. Some injury, right? Some hand injury and then you will not have the ability to put into practice the gift that you have. So what I think is important is also to not ground your identity totally in the gifts you have, right? Because as we age, we lose our memory. If you're physically beautiful, that's not going to last. So, right, we can't ground our identity in these gifts, but we have to use them with the time that's allotted to us and in the way that God allows us to.
Well said.
I can't say enough about that last point that you just made about the importance of that in working with people who might be academically gifted. That's really important, especially in our society that really tends to ground identity in things that you do. Mm-hmm. So they say, you're really good at this. That's kind of your box. That's who you are as a person. And what happens is, like you said, when something happens that, whether it's permanently gone, whether it's temporarily gone, or even a matter of there's a failure, right? You don't succeed where you've succeeded every other time in your entire life. If that has become a part of your identity, it is absolutely crushing. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think the importance of that formation comes in, right? That's where, if all we're talking about here is education, about challenging students academically, they're going to go out into life, into the world, with the expectation that that is their identity. And when they inevitably fail, because they are going to fail, it is really tough to recover. And so that's so crucial, I think, for us as Catholics, for us as parents, to really help our students understand their identity as human beings, as obviously as our children, but first and foremost, as sons and daughters of God who are created in his image and likeness, is that no failure of whatever gift you have could ever impact that identity. And I think that's such a crucial point. I'm so glad that you said that, mm-hmm. Because I mean, everybody struggles with this issue of identity. Every single person, regardless of the situation, it's a constant struggle as human beings. It's part of a human being is struggling with, who am I? I mean, that's one of the fundamental questions that's been asked back to the beginning of time. It's asked in scriptures. It's asked by the greatest Greek philosophers, the Roman philosophers. Everybody has asked this question, who am I? Both as an individual and who are we as human beings. And especially in our society, that's boiled down to, you are what you do or what you're good at. And that's who you are. And the result is an inevitable failure. And so a lot of there's an epidemic of mental health issues. And so much of that is tied to this question of identity. Because if we get the identity question wrong, everything else breaks. And so this is, when for students with certain academic gifts, that is one area which it can go really, really wrong. And so I think it's a really important point that you just made.
Joseph, I think that was a beautiful statement about giftedness, and I think the importance of supporting them at all times. They truly feel more than their world is just different. The perspective that they have, they just feel more, they just capture more their sensitivity. And I think that's important to always, well, I think all parents, or I want to believe that all parents are always supporting their children. But yeah, just remarking this area.
I think one of the many blessings of the Kolbe education is coming to view these gifts as just that. They're gifts to us. We're not entitled to them. And yes, they can, they're meant to be used in the service of God's will. That's right. And I think all the ways that Kolbe forms students help to reinforce that idea. Okay, so like I mentioned one KolbeCast episode before, episode 68, Grace for the Nitty Gritty, earlier in our conversation. I also wanted to mention a couple of other episodes, number 52, Through a Catholic Lens, with our chair of the English and Literature Department, Kim Crawford, another well-known voice here on the KolbeCast, Through a Catholic Lens, about Kolbe's approach to literature studies, which very much applies to the conversation we've had here today. And also episode 92 with Nikolai and Kathy Lund that aired here recently. They had a lot to say that really applies to this conversation as well. So check out those episodes. We'll link to them in our show notes. Joseph and Veronica, thank you so much for coming to talk to us today.
Thank you so much, Bunny.
Thank you. Really enjoyed it.
Good deal. Good deal.
Fantastic. Thanks to have us back.
Thanks, Everett.
Subscribe to the KolbeCast on your favorite podcast app so that you don't miss an episode. And let us know how we're doing by leaving a rating or a review. And as always, feel free to email us at podcast@kolbe.org.
Mary, our Mother, pray for us. St. Maximilian Kolbe, pray for us. Ad Maiorem Dei Gloriam.